A few months before my experience I had tried AMT once, one 30mg pill which disappointingly, gave both my friend and me no effects whatsoever. Fast forward to the second time, and after a failed attempt at getting hold of some shrooms to have a fun-filled psychedelic day round of friends, I suggested that we try AMT again. Instead, this time upping the dosage to 60mg so to avoid any disappointment and have a real AMT day. I've never experienced any kind of trippy or psychedelic drug before, and after reading many reports and doing my research I decided that AMT would be a good choice for a first-time psychedelic experience. The timing of this experience report will be a little vague as the trip happened a while prior to writing, but I'll try to give some rough indication. The setting: 'twas a nice Saturday afternoon and the plan was to chill round a friend's free house all day, a nice safe haven with some great company to trip in, and just take some AMT and see where it took us. There were 5 of us taking it all together, myself, J, C, T, and later that evening we were joined by Z. We never really planned to venture outside and for the most part stayed indoors, dressed in stupid onesies or coats etc. True psychedelic gear. A fun day was surely ahead of us. T equals 3 p.m. Me, J, C and T each took the 230mg pills. There was no going back now. We were all in high spirits and having a laugh and were just chilling, waiting for something to happen. Knowing that any effects with AMT can take quite a while to arise, I was surprised that nausea had kicked in for all but me around T plus 25 minutes, with onset rapidly approaching. J and T ended up vomiting, a phase which does eventually pass. I told them that it sucks but at least you know it's working. Nothing for me yet, but the rest of the guys were beginning to start feeling quite speedy and somewhat hyped, all laughing and reveling and putting some music on to dance to etc. I was in the toilet while they were all outside listening to music and whatnot. Here I started to notice some kind of effect, very mild and barely noticeable. I wasn't sure whether the light shining through a purple vase on the windowsill looked or seemed any different to normal. Anyway, I was starting to feel what I can only describe as a very slow growing sense of increased contentment. I knew something was going to happen and I felt good about it. D plus 45 minutes I joined the others and they seemed to be coming up a lot quicker than I was, very speedy and chatty and acting stupid. They started to comment on some mild visuals. At this point I was starting to feel mild effects of the drugs too, mild disorientation, increased energy. Hearing that they were getting mild visuals, yep, that poster of Jimi Hendrix just winked. He just winked at me. I decided to cover my eyes to see if there were any cool sevs going on, and to my surprise there were. Something I'd never experienced properly before, so found it very cool. An interesting note, I was seeing some nice colors and patterns, but the main bulk of what I was seeing was all seeing eyes, dollar signs, stars of David etc., which is strange as people always comment on how psychedelics can be tools to unlock knowledge and connect with arcane realms and dimensions etc. It made me think of that sort of thing, obviously because I've seen and been subject to these images and their meanings before. I may be conditioned to perhaps see these sort of things if I'm tripping. Be interesting see if anything similar happens with someone who has no knowledge of these symbols and their meanings. D plus 1 hour. All of us were starting to come up properly now. Not being able to keep still, we decided to go downstairs to put some more music on and go outside for a cigarette. With some good loud music on, the speedy hyper feelings continued. Visuals were starting to become prominent now. Watching the trees in the garden swaying in the wind was very fun. T was commenting on how fascinating and alluring a fence panel seemed to him. Oh no way, I just saw an eagle. It was definitely beginning. C was saying how it's like all the best traits of different drugs rolled into one, the disorientation from ket, the speediness of MDMA, the laughter and visuals of shrooms/LSD. Little did we know there was still so much more fantastic times to come. The visuals at this point weren't too intense, but definitely noticeable. Lights and colors seemed more lucid, and if you concentrated enough everything had a definite wave to it. After smoking we retreated inside to listen to some music in the living room. I chose a song to listen to, 2. Reprise, the James Cleaver Quintet, a short, powerful, classical-esque piece. We all laid on the floor close to each other, eyes closed, listening in awe to the sheer beauty and intensity of this song. The drug had taken its hold and was creating a whole new listening experience. When it finished we were all left astonished. At that point, it had truly begun. That song was the definitive come-up song. D plus 1 hour and 30 minutes. This drug definitely goes through stages, and after we established we'd all come up properly, we were still in the speedy, elevated mood, vivid color stage, and was having a lot of fun dancing to some Rodrigo y Gabriela. In the kitchen we were all singing and playing guitar. The AMT had made us all into better singers. It was breathing life into us. Each other's company that we were enjoying was enhanced tenfold. It was quickly becoming unanimous that it was one of the best drugs we'd taken, and there was still so much to come. It was strange because I made a few films on my phone and whilst doing so thought, watching these videos later is just not going to be the same thing. At many times throughout the experience I stopped to comment, that behind this wondrous curtain of psychedelia, was just 4 guys fucking around in a house. To an outsider, we must look so strange. I'm quite an analytical person, and think about things a lot, which is probably why I thought this, but it didn't detract from the experience at all, just something I hadn't experienced before and found funny to think about. D+2 hours. Visuals were becoming ever more present. Each trip to the toilet it became increasingly more difficult to aim because there were so many fantastic, sparkling colors and patterns in the way of the visual field. We were all still loving it and having a great time. Unlike other drugs, this one has more than one plateau, with effects lasting for so long. Each part of the experience gets to a certain point and stays that way for a while, then it gets a bit more intense or changes and carries on. Depending on what you're doing as well can completely change the entire scope of how you feel or what's going on. Even though everything seemed amazing, colors everywhere, throughout the whole experience all of us were completely coherent. If you concentrate, or go off on your own, you can lose yourself in complete bliss. It's amazing, but we all still managed to stay completely with it and chat and carry on as normal whenever we wanted. As me and Jay are oddly similar, a lot of times when we were sitting and chilling I'd look at him and his face would morph and look even more like mine. It was as if I was able to see with new eyes, from a completely new view and way, the similarity between us personified within my friend. Such a freaky sight to behold, but extremely cool at the same time. D+4 hours. Not even halfway through the experience, we were all in full swing now. Now things were really going on. We'd start to notice new traits and things about AMT. The way it affected us seemed to reflect each of our personalities or what we wanted out of the drug. I was getting in my own little world, C was all hyped up and loving life, J was chilling bit time, and T was just, well, T. Another great and strange aspect was, when in a room with someone, sitting next to them or whatever, a lot of the time you'd want to close your eyes and just take in the nice feeling and look at the extremely vivid sevs, without realizing at first. The drug almost gives you a form of extrasensory perception. For me personally it was strong. I could not only feel, but sense the people I was with. A lot of times we'd say that after closing your eyes next to someone, upon opening them again they were often across the room, or you opened them to find yourself in the room completely alone, even though you were certain you could feel them right next to you. Just the great energies us guys were giving off, right there with you. For me personally this was one of the greatest aspects of the drug, which grew and changed throughout the course. This leads me, to hands down, easily the most profound spiritual experience of my entire life. We had a good set of iPod speakers and C's phone was providing us with some excellent tunes, really nice bassy house and electro tunes that you could really feel and get into, as throughout the whole thing we had a lot of energy and were always uplifted. It added the perfect party-like vibe whilst still being able to chill. As everything just looks beautiful and is intriguing, I often found myself doing normal things just to see what it was like under the influence, to try and gain new experiences. I found myself in the living room on my own, after opening my eyes, thinking I could feel the presence of the others in the room, to find no one was there once again. Liking the music that was playing and feeling great, I decided to place my chin right on the side, with my face directly in front of the speakers. I could feel the music, the bass was pushing the air from the speaker onto my face, and with each burst it gave a feeling of sweet ecstasy, somewhat similar to doing the same thing on MDMA, but, in my opinion, better, not as intense and more controlled. Loving this, I decided to close my eyes and lose myself in the sevs and let the music take me. It really was taking me. I started to meditate and thought I would just completely let go and wholly indulge myself into the heart of the experience. I can safely say it was probably one of the greatest ideas I've ever had. The bass of the music in my face, the sevs, feelings I had never experienced before in my entire life. This is where the drug plateaued again. I was completely lost in the experience. This is also where the spiritual vibe truly blossomed. In this new realm, if you will, I felt completely connected, so many thoughts and experiences going through my head in flawless harmony. My soul was on fire. I could feel a definite presence right there with me, as though the entire room was filled with great, happy, warming energies, whether that be from all my loved ones, from the guys, or something that was just there, right there with me, giving me a spiritual pat on the back. Not something physically felt, but a feeling I cannot describe that I have never managed to have felt before. At that moment, everything just seemed to make sense. What psychedelic drugs were all about, the places they can take you, how in everyday life, people, through their own means can find and replicate this kind of feeling. I felt truly astonished and enlightened. I have never considered myself a spiritual person, and never have I truly felt presences or auras, which is partly why I was so amazed and delighted with these newfound feelings the drug had given me. I was so glad that it had allowed me to experience something completely new and actually given me insight into spirituality and the way some people, for example religious, feel and some of the great things they can experience. I hope to remember this for the rest of my life. D+5 hours. Chapter 7, The Laser Pen Again Men. After this amazing experience in front of the speakers, I felt an immense need to go and tell the guys, not in a forced, urgent way like on MDMA, more just because what had happened was so incredible. I went upstairs to find Jay and C on the PC listening to Enya while Jay was telling a made-up story to go with the music. C had managed to delve into this experience and was in literal fits of ecstasy on the floor. He described it as one of the most beautiful moments of his year. I told T to try out the experience I had, and afterwards he said he had a pretty sick time too. Much time passed with us mainly wandering around or just spending time chatting and joking around, listening to music or finding interesting things to do/look at, visuals always remaining a main feature, and if anything going through waves and getting stronger. It dawned upon me that now was an excellent time to get my laser pen out of my bag. This is no ordinary laser pen. This thing is 6 inches long and very powerful. I brought it especially as I knew it would be an excellent tool to have whilst on a psychedelic. Again, what follows was the second most profound experience on the drug, but easily the most visually profound. The downstairs bathroom was small and dark enough, with the door closed, that I could get a little light show going on in there, and oh my god, sitting on the toilet with the seat down shining this thing about, was one of the most incredible things I've ever had the pleasure of seeing. I spent at least 5 minutes in there playing with this thing, a beacon from the gods, making waves with it. Watching the bright green light bounce and refract off things was like nothing I'd ever seen before. I think the deprivation of the senses added with this trippy tool intensifies the experience immensely. The spaced out buzz was much more in the dark toilet, so much so that when I finally stepped out of the toilet it was the only point in the day where I felt out of it, albeit for only a few seconds. Speechless, I went into the living room to try and even begin to explain what happened to me. I simply could not put it into words. C laughed. Look at him, he's speechless. Get back in there and think about what you've done. Gladly. After spending more time toying about with the laser pen and immensely enjoying myself in the small, dark toilet, I decided to get a drink where I found Jay lounging about in the kitchen. I urged him to come see what I had discovered. Reluctantly he followed me into the small, uncomfortable with 2 people, toilet and awkwardly sat down with me, not really being bothered at his slight WTF are you doing, as I knew he would soon forgive me. I began the light show and all bother was washed away, and amazement was the key feature of the small bathroom from then on. Jay was equally amazed and in awe at the might of the laser pen, so much in fact that it was a must that we bring C and T in on this. Squashed and cramped into the small space, with such a hype at the intensity of the laser pen we began a little build-up. All being a little strange, we started making this weird build-up noise. With enough tension I unleashed the light and we all sat in amazement for ages. Make waves with it. Shine it on the tap. Oh my god. Etc. etc. That there was a truly magical moment that I don't think any of us will be forgetting anytime soon. After a cigarette, and probably a trip or two back into the light show closet, we spent the next few hours listening to music, playing with the laser pen, still rolling hard on this fantastic substance with still many more hours of enjoyment to come. D+6 to 7 hours. After spending a lot more time doing pretty much nothing, we found out blowing smoke through the laser pen so you can see the actual beam of it was amazing. The smoke dancing around the small pillar of green light was so intriguing as there were patterns within it and the visible flecks of dust sparkled and glittered as well. Much time was spent listening to music and doing that, all still unanimous on the fact that we were all so coherent and could chat away to our heart's content, and trip Major Bullsack as much as you want to. Soon after Z finally arrived, I could barely say hello as I was too far in with the laser pen still. I later broke free and said hello properly. We were all chilling in the kitchen explaining how amazing we all felt and what a sweet day we'd been having. The colors, the patterns, the heightened sense of spirituality, the amalgamation of all the characteristics of different drugs in one. It was definitely a bit too late in the day to dose in my opinion, but Z wanted to join in on the fun so opted for 30 milligrams just to see what it was saying, which wasn't as bad. Time was spent chilling in the kitchen just discussing the day's events. Spirits were high, conversation was flowing. Soon Z started to come up and go through the dreaded nausea stage. We all told her it's literally just a phase and you will feel so much better if you just go to the toilet and let it do its thing. Soon after you could tell that 30 milligrams was enough to feel it for Z, as she had the puzzled, disorientated look on her face. She was definitely feeling how we were many hours prior. I was unsure whether she was actually enjoying it or not, Being the type of person who wouldn't want anyone else to worry about her in case it ruined their fun, she just kept smiling and nodding when we asked if she was okay, having fun or not. She most certainly looked like she was looking at things from a different perspective and taking things in from a new angle. We later found that she was in fact okay, but for whatever reason the drug had taken her ability to speak and was much more content in listening to us guys chat nonsense and be idiots. A small negative note to comment on is the body load produced from AMT. Whilst it was mainly me who noticed anything, I kept getting this recurring chest pain. Much like indigestion, but it came and went every now and then, easily ignored but still noticeable, not something you particularly want when experimenting with a research chemical. C complained of something similar but more of a hunger pain. We figured they could have something to do with eating barely anything all day, so C and I tried to munch down a piece of toast, which leads me to my next point, dry mouth. Taking 20 minutes to eat a singular piece of toast isn't really ideal, especially when each bite just rolls into a ball and ends up like chewing gum at the back of your mouth. Hard to swallow due to lack of saliva. With gulps of water in between we managed it however. As AMT is a stimulant, I knew to take similar precautions as MDMA, so was sipping water throughout the day. Even so, there was a very high amount of fluid retention and I was suffering from classic pilly willy and found it extremely hard to piss. Definitely one to be careful with. Depending on what you're doing, you want to drink enough water but not too much blah blah blah. D plus 8 to 12 hours. Although having more of an inward experience, Z was now balls deep in AMT and had settled, and so everything turned back to normal, so to speak. A lot of time was spent alternating between smoking in the kitchen and lounging around listening to music / tripping out in the living room. Colors, visuals and headspace still super present. I remember trying to piss at one point and could barely aim into the toilet as there was so much in the way of my visual field. I was feeling more of a low-light vibe. I felt colors were more present on surfaces that way and everywhere still looked like a disco. I remember doing the classic lying down and waving my hand in front of my face, happily staring at the rainbow light tracers it was producing. I figured now would be a great time to go stare at myself in the mirror, just to see what that gave me. It was weird and fun watching my face morph and change around in a whirlwind of colors and thinking more in depth than ever that wow, this is how people actually perceive me. At one point my face warped in such a way that I looked much like my brother. Having passed away, you'd think this would be a disconcerting sight. Quite the contrary, it made me think very warmly of him, that he was a part of me, that his death and the events that followed, however much they may have sucked, have made me into the man I am today, and how grateful I am for that. It was nice thinking of it in such a clear and bright way. A very sweet experience indeed. Z was still chilling and much in her own little world. I was having a chat with her, trying to get a conversation flowing, still ever so slightly worried in case she was having a bit of a bad one and didn't want to say, just asking her what her experience was like on half the dose. I was surprised to hear that visuals were hardly a thing for her, and it was more of a body high / head space. When I close my eyes it feels like I'm at a party. She too was getting the feeling of presence with eyes closed and said the general vibe was a really nice feeling. After probably the final peak, much to my dismay, for me there was a sudden drop in effects. I may have been just on the couch on my own listening to music and staring at stuff, but all of a sudden the visuals became slightly less intense. It was a bit sad because I missed them and wanted them back, but all good things must come to an end, I suppose. They were still definitely present, but just not as intense. I went into the kitchen and everyone said they felt similar. I found however that if you isolate it, for example go back into the dark toilet, and concentrate, you can bring it all back. This was a great idea. With my quest to regain intensity of the feelings, I spent some time on my own in the living room in the dark with the laser pen listening to music. It definitely helped, with visuals a bit less prominent, but still very much there. It was easier to focus on the feelings / head space. I watched the iPod on the speakers spin round and change color and shape, some kinda house music again. Whatever album art was on the screen, it was cool. I couldn't really make out what it was, but it almost looked like a little tribal mask type face thing. The music was amazing. I was getting so into watching it change shape, shining the laser pen about. I felt like it too had a presence. It was a being. I felt as if it was almost trying to convey a message to me. I was concentrating and listening so hard, getting so deep, I just couldn't decipher what it was trying to say. I was so sure it did have something to say, however, what it was, I'll never know. I remember sitting on the toilet again with the laser pen just staring at the floor, pointing the pen at the door. In tempo with the music, I shot a short pulse of the laser against the door, illuminating that area. This led to beautiful waves of pixelated color, rippling and falling down all around me with every push of the button. I could have sat there for hours watching these multicolored waves that seemed just as intrinsic and in time as the sea. I think for me, this was the last truly astonishing visual of the trip. D plus 13 to 17 hours. With visuals merely lingering now, we thought it was great time to crack out the weed. This definitely brought the feelings back and made the visuals more present too. It gave them new quality. They were more intricate now, things waving about had minute patterns and details on closer inspection. A nice addition. One of the greatest features of the drug for me now was the heightened sense of spirituality it gave me. All getting deep on the convo, I felt like I could listen with more intent than I ever had before, and break down each sentence and conversation and see the meaning behind it and what it truly meant, and why each person was saying it. I felt like in that kitchen, I was chilling with a bunch of personalities, or auras. Although they were all there sitting in front of me, I felt more connected to each of them spiritually than I ever had with anyone in my life. A real insight for me and such a sweet thing to have happened. I just wanted to tell them all how I felt, and what kind of person they were, as this drug seems to make one's personality, or spirit in this sense, shine through and also make it easier to pick up on. Sounds kinda lame, but it wasn't as forced and inappropriate as MDMA. More of an elated spiritual high. With doobies on the go, we all slowly descended into madness. Being awake and tripping for so long was perhaps a bit taxing, and the weed made us all stupid and doped up. Conversation was turning to mush and mostly ended in hysterical laughter at absolutely nothing, which is always great fun. Although visuals were nearly non-existent, an oil painting on the wall of a flamenco woman, smiley duck back, was still constantly in motion, for all of us, constantly swaying and moving. Jay, whose house it was, had the painting for years, and now tripping had only just noticed that if you look at the painting in a certain way, noticed that the hair and low-cut dress of the woman with her back looked just like a smiling duck. Something we all instantly picked up on and laughed for the remainder of the night. Finally, we decided it was time to pop some diazepam, listen to some music in the lounge, and then maybe think about bed. We decided to put on something chill and went with John Mayer's live album Where the Light Is. The first few tracks were acoustic. Having never heard the album, it was one of the most magical things I've ever listened to. Being a great album and a highly talented singer anyway, AMT just made it phenomenal. The songs were utterly awe-inspiring, like nothing I'd ever heard. It was almost like being at the actual gig, listening to the most beautiful singing ever. The sun was slowly rising on a crisp, clear autumn day. We all bid each other good night, or morning, and got into bed, with effects bare lingering. It was one of the most beautiful sunrises I'd ever seen. I wanted to stay up to watch it but knew it would be a silly idea, and we had to close the blinds anyway. The 20 to 30 milligrams diazepam helped, but sleep was still difficult to achieve, although not impossible, and thus ended one of the greatest days I've ever had. Conclusion. Wow. What can I say? For a first-time psychedelic experience, it literally could not have gone better. AMT all now sits very high atop our favorites list. The length of the drug can be an often selling point. A full day is needed, and preferably a day off the next day. Thankfully we all awoke the next day after 8 hours sleep feeling fresh and enlightened with no signs of a come down. The fact that it's so intense but allows me to remain as coherent as I want, in my opinion, makes it a fantastic first-time psychedelic.